So once again, hello everyone. It is more like good afternoon. I've seen from the participants that most are coming more from the eastern part, not from the western part. And I am very happy to welcome you back to the second part of the learning journey, hazard and risk assessment. My name is Tony Jör. I am working as DRR and climate change adaptation advisor with the Swiss Red Cross. And I'm also a member of the core group of the Swiss NGO DRR platform. Again, as usual, a few etiquette remarks for this webinar to start with. As for all webinars, we are recording the plenary sessions and will upload them on the platform website afterwards. And please keep your mic muted, but please keep your camera on at all times if your bandwidth allows for it. You can also ask questions, of course, either by raising your hand and using the mic, or also by using the chat. Maybe today, if we're a bit strained, please, yeah, you can use both. We'll manage. The webinar today is the second module of the second part of the learning journey, focusing on quantitative risk assessment. The second part consists of 5 webinars that take place from March to May. This webinar and the next one are on quantitative risk assessment and cost-benefit analysis. They are very much interlinked. Webinars 4 and 5 will be on GIS. And that's already all from my side. And let's get started. As I have a bit seen what's coming up, I'll tell you it has to do a bit with calculation, of course, because that's a bit also what risk assessments are. So please, Georg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Tony. It's not that complicated, but you are right. There's something to calculate today. That's also the reason why I just have 15 slides, because most of the time will be you who will work. But let's start. We'll have some next to the first module we had last time. I hope you can see all my screen. This image, maybe you remember. We saw this catchment in South America, in Chile. You have in gray colors the lowest part of the catchment, torrent from right to left, and you have the hazardous areas marked in red and yellow colors. You have a stream flowing from up to down, and you have in violet, in purple, you have our working area. And we defined about 15 critical sites marked in purple as well here. Most of them are within the red area. That means the high hazard level. You have the abbreviations EN, that means inundation, and 7, the different numbers concerning or considering the matrix here on the right side. The higher the number, the more dangerous the area. And we are quite all of the buildings are in flooding or inundation 7. That means each about 100 years an event will occur with high intensities. Just the recapitulation from what we have done last time. To give you an idea, approximately 120 persons are exposed in these buildings. Return period of debris flow events or flooding events are 100 years. During such events, a destruction of the buildings have to be expected, and there's no option to flee because the flow velocity is very fast. we are considering that nobody can flee during this event. You worked in our group work. You defined your criteria to decide if you would apply mitigation measures or not. You mentioned the criteria or the factors we need for the calculation of risks of possible damages in the future, and also for cost-benefit analysis. And I would like to highlight some responses you made. Some of them are grouped. You mentioned that the number of affected people is an important aspect to define for mitigation measures. Many of you mentioned this part. You mentioned also that the costs is an aspect for cost-benefit analysis, the money available. And you mentioned as well the probability of hazard events. That means the return period, likeliness of disaster. Some of you mentioned it depends on the impact I can reach with our mitigation measures. So if I apply mitigation measure without any impact, doesn't work. Some of you mentioned environmental impact as well. Well, could be an aspect also. It must be relevant for communities. I interpreted that as impact of the mitigation measure. And some of you, I realized that was Tony. He mentioned the maintenance must be guaranteed and community owned. Maintenance is an important aspect as well. All of these aspects we have to quantify today. Resume, you can see in this frame here, number of affected persons, costs, probability of event, effect of the measure, and maintenance. But there are other aspects as well. And I was a little bit wondering that you didn't mention some of them. For example, capacities of the persons. That's an important aspect of the criteria for the risk level. The higher the capacities, the lower the risks. We have to consider the capacities as well. The intensity of the hazardous processes. It is important to have difference between low intensity, that means maybe water until your knees, or is it a flow height until your head? The resistance of the buildings, is it adobe or house or wooden house, or is it concrete built house? And also the time of stay in the hazardous areas. Is it a church where you stay maybe 1 hour per week or per day? It depends. Or is it your homestay where you stay maybe 12 hours per day in this house? So the probability to be affected will be higher. These maybe are the key criteria for the risk calculation. I can't remember if we saw, yeah, I think I showed this slide as, also last time. If we are thinking on mitigation measure, there are different possibilities, like always. In our case here, we decided to build a dam, showed in red, together with a channel to channelize and to deflect the debris flow or the flood, and to guide the flood in this area here where we have almost no houses. There are 3 of them, but few compared with the other side, the upper side of the area here. And for sure, these mitigation measures shown in red are not for free. They have the costs. We have to compare benefit and cost. And I would like to know, without having done any calculation, without having had a deep insight of the methodology for calculation of risk, which maximum amount would you invest for protect the critical sites? And maybe you can write that in the chat. Just each of you to have a number to see the difference we have in our team, in our group. Please feel free to write your amount in the chat. The moment I can't see any idea. Amount depends on the local available budget. Thomas, absolutely correct. Can you give us a number? Or maybe you are already calculating. I don't know. Okay, let's wait to have the correct value. We can go further. And the risk concept I showed you last time, I changed it a little bit to explain it in a little bit in another way. We still have our 5 cows. We still have our wolf. But to reach the cows, to eat the cows, to create the damage, it's a little bit different. At the moment, the wolf has 2 options to reach the stable, the house where the cows are in. And if he decides for the left side or for the right side, so the probability to reach the house is 50%. That's what we saw last time. So the probability to die depends on the amount of path options. And we realized our first calculation. The expected damage are the 5 cows multiplied with the value of each luxury cow and the probability to die. So that means our expected damage, or the expected damage for the farmer, is $2,500. As the definition of risk is expected damage in monetized per a certain period of time, normally per year, we have to define the expected damage per year, which is when the wolf appears every 10 years, the value divided by 10. That means a yearly expected damage of $250. In our case now, the farmer decided to create 2 additional ways to reduce the probability to reach the house. In our case, so the probability changed from 0.5 to 0.25. And so the risk will be reduced, the half of the value, $125 per year. That's our benefit, the risk reduction. The $125 per year is our benefit, risk before and risk with mitigation measure. The difference is the benefit combined with the costs. And the cost of the mitigation measure, in our case, the 2 additional ways, cost maybe the construction $2,000, and after 25 years, the paths are destroyed So the yearly costs are $80 per year without maintenance cost, Tony, as the maintenance you mentioned before or last time. So benefit cost relation is higher than 1. That means it's recommendable to realize the mitigation measure. The higher the benefit cost relation, the more recommended is the realization of the mitigation measures. Maybe you have 2 or 3 or 4 mitigation measure options. So for sure you look for the best relation and decide this type of mitigation measure. Also, this one we discussed last time. We have the probability to die depending on the type of the hazard, the intensity of the hazard. In the case of the wolf, his bite intensity, and the number of way options. And in our reality, it depends also on the type of the hazard: flood, debris flow, landslides, rockfall, avalanches. Depends on the flow intensity and the physical vulnerability of the building. Because we are considering that people stay in the house when the event occurs, not outside of the house. That's the reason why I built this symbol of the house ahead of this person. But it depends also on capacities. The agility of people to flee. It's better in a school than in a house in a hospital. The existence of a functional emergency committee, maybe an existing early warning system. So these are capacities that can, depending on each case, can reduce the probability to die or the risk. For assets that are less criteria, type of hazard, flow intensity, as well, physical vulnerability of the building. And for livelihood is also type of hazard, flow intensity, and the set of capacities that we will learn which one they could be. So, and that's all to calculate the risks and to compare benefit and cost. And I would like that you practice the calculation by your own. That means in groups. I prepared 3 examples, but I would like first show how the calculation works. First, the risk of the possible damages for the assets, the risk for assets. For this building, the main school. As we mentioned before, physical vulnerability, that means resistancy of the building, and the object value divided by the return period. In our case, the return period is considered as a 100-yearly event within this red area, EN7. Extremely rare event, that means 100-yearly event, high intensity, we are here. Maybe you see my mouse. So this is a simple equation, but you have to follow it. Additionally, we would like to calculate the risk for persons. And as I mentioned before, are the same criteria: the exposed time per day, the probability to flee, the physical vulnerability of the building because the people are within the houses, and the combination of these 3 criteria results in the mortality. And you will find a list of mortality values. You don't have to invent the value for mortality by yourself. So there's a list offered to you to use the respective values. And it depends on the willingness to pay. This is an ethical criteria I will explain in a little bit further on. Which amount authorities are willed to invest to avoid a death. Before entering the discussion regarding the willingness to pay and the ethic about this parameter, I show you just the equation, the risk for persons, M, that means the mortality, given by a list of values, multiplied with the willingness to pay, divided by the return period. It's like we saw before, it's a 100-yearly event, so divided by 100. And you have to multiply by the number of people. So that you need to, for the calculation, you need to have those values for each of the criteria, and they prepared you as a first object to calculate the physical vulnerability 0.5, 50%. Object value of the building are $3,000 for this main school. The probability to die is quite low, 0.05. In other words, that means each 20 person would die in such an event. The willingness to pay is $500, and there are 50 persons in the building. So we have to do two calculations, first for the assets and then for the persons, and then to build the sum of both to have the total risk value. And this monetized value is for the actual situation without any mitigation measure. And for sure, afterwards, we have to do the same calculation, considering the hazard map or the situation with the mitigation measure.
Georg, Sanjib just asked, what is the return period? Maybe you just repeat again.
Sure. The return period, you see that in the hazard map. The analysis of the hazards have been already done. We learned that during the last learning journey last year, and it has been considered as this area in a return period of 10 years, nothing happens. Each 30 years, that means a generational event, nothing happens. But in extremely events with a return period of 100 years, it's considered to have a flooding event that will affect all the colored areas. And depending on the energy that the event has and the frequency it has, we apply different colors, as you see in this 9-field diagram here on the upper side. So when you have high intensities, that means people will die. They will be affected by such an event. The intensity is high, and the return period is considered as very low. Just every 100 years, such an event will be expected. It can happen tomorrow, but statistically, the frequency is every 100 years. And our building, our main school, is within this red area with the number 7. And the number 7 on the 9-field diagram is localized here on the upper side, high intensity and extremely rare, the return period, 100-yearly event. So when you are doing a calculation, for example, for this small building here on the lower part in our area, is flooding 1, EN1, inundation 1. The return period is also during a 100-yearly event will be affected, but the intensities are low. So nobody will die in this area here, but in the red area, yes. Is that okay for you, the response? Okay.
And then maybe before we start, Thomas also had a remark that you could maybe react to. We have to, when we ask, about how much we are, the first question you asked us, how much we want to pay for reducing the risk for this region. We have to add the yearly maintenance costs to the investment for mitigation measures. So better to reallocate the buildings.
Yeah.
What is your response to that?
In countries where I worked, it was the common mitigation measure, and the consequences were that the people returned. The government gave them all the terrains to build their houses, and they went there, and after a couple of years they came back. Or the other situation I learned in Middle America was that people changed their houses to the new area, and they sold to other person the house they had before. So they had a new income source, but for people in high risk areas. So relocating of people should be always the last option. It can be an option, but it should be the last one. Is that okay, Thomas, for you?
Yeah, it's okay with me, but I think it's a governance problem. Yeah, I mean, in Switzerland, if the government says there's no option to construct something here, or you have to go, then they have to go. I think it's a governance problem. And I think in the long run, it would be less costly to reallocate the people, because you have obvious costs otherwise. And I would build retention rooms and regreen maybe the hills or whatever to reduce the impact a little bit. But still, you would have cost all the time, and I think that's a problem. And that's also a problem to come up with one amount, because you have to think about all the years. Thank you.
You're all absolutely right. You will see in our calculation, we will consider the maintenance cost, considering the duration of the lifespan of the mitigation measure. And that's within the relation cost and benefit. Yeah, each case is a specific case. You have to define which one of the mitigation measures is the best. And I saw a question, or I missed part one. Could you clarify more about this probability to die? 50%. Why is it set for 50 or 0.5? Yes, I can, for sure, I can repeat that. In the case of the wolf, it's the two choices he has. If there would be just one way, so probability to reach the house and to eat eat all the cows is 100%. If he has two options, it will be reduced to 50%. If I go to our reality, in that case, physical vulnerability is considered a little bit in another aspect. That means during an event, it's been considered that 50% of the house will be destroyed, or can also be 50% of all houses will be destroyed completely. And this physical vulnerability means the resistance of the building. And this depends on the construction type. Wooden house, adobe house, concrete walls, maybe age of the building, and it depends on the intensity of the hazardous process. And for that values, you will get a list considering these aspects I mentioned before. the resistance of the building, and the intensity of the process. Okay.
And then, you know, the mortality of 0.05, you calculate it with exposed time, maybe 6 hours per day or so, where people are at school, the probability to flee with a number, together with the physical vulnerability. But you didn't calculate here. We just assumed here it's now 0.05, right?
That's correct. It is lower. The mortality is lower than the physical vulnerability, because you're considering that maybe the house will not be destroyed from one second to the other. It will be some kind, yes, destroyed, but people have still some of the people still have the possibility to flee. And as it is set by 0.05, that means each 5% of all people will die during this event. These are values gained from experiences from earlier events, from the government who defined these risk values. Yeah, if that works for you, or go more in detail as you like. But for our example, this is a value given. It's a given value, and you have to calculate the risks, these two aspects of risks, considering these values. I would like to give you also the other two examples. Brick house, they are also physical vulnerability. It is less resistant than the main school, as you see, 0.9. That means 90% of the building will be destroyed. The object value to rebuild the brick house is $100,000, and the mortality is the double as we had in the main school. The mortality is higher because the resistance of the building is less. Probably the probability to flee is also less. And we have 4 persons living in the house. Maybe before splitting us in groups, we can just follow together this aspect of the assets for the main school to have a practical idea. So here I would fill it up. Physical vulnerability 0.5 multiplied by object value. The object value is $3,000. That means $150,000. Return period 100 years. That means $1,500 per year. That would be the risk of the asset. And in the same way, you can calculate the risk for persons and to add both of them. Is the group exercise for everybody clear, or should we go more in? Should we precise it more?
I think maybe a good idea is to start and calculate. Let groups a bit see how it works, and then come back and see how we've done.
Yeah, I would like to make a Kahoot game just to see your results. And afterwards, that will be probably after the break, we can discuss some parts. Yeah, I have also discussions in my group, how to define this mortality, how to define this physical vulnerability, from where came these values, where do you know that it's 0.05 and so on. So that we can discuss afterwards.
Yeah, I believe you have to do that for all of us again, probably. Yes, that was what Sanjeev and I were discussing. Yes.
Okay. But if you agree, let's start first the Kahoot to see where we are with our calculations. You see, I don't know if everybody of you knows the Kahoot. You see the screen, the blue screen, and you can just with your with a cellular phone screen the QR code, and then you can enter the game where you have to give you a name, your name, and then you have to wait for the questions I will send you. Yeah, 3 players. 5. KKA.
We should be 18. Please, everybody, join.
Sergio. Are you in, Tony?
Yes. Don't you see my name?
Oh, yeah.
I was not in a group. I did it myself, so I'm not. I'm a bit shaky with the results. Let's see.
Okay, I think let's go with this. We are 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 11. It depends also on your velocity to enter the values. You have 20 seconds to enter your values. The risk of assets, just for assets, for the main school, that was the example on the left side of the screen.
Oh.
Okay, we have 3 persons who define $1,500 per year, which is correct. And we have other values as well, but correct is 1,500. We go to the next question. Tom was the fastest player, followed by Jana and Sonja. Next question, the risk of asset and persons for the same example, for the main school. That means asset risk of 1,500 and the risk of persons, the sum of both risks. Oh, everybody correct? Perfect. Great. Let's go to the... Oh, Jana at the first place, followed by Tom and Sonja. Third question. The total risk of the brick house, that was the second example. The total risk, both risk aspects. Almost everybody is fine with this answer. Tom, there's still a possibility to gain. Jana is at the first point, followed by Sonja and Maria. The last question, the total risk for the hospital. Yeah. The biggest part of the group decided correctly, 35,000 per year. Ah, it changed. Great.
Bravo!
Congratulations. Okay. just have to switch off the Kahoot. Maybe I will explain now, before the break, how to define the values. It takes maybe 3-4 minutes, and then we could make the break. Is that okay, Tony?
Yeah.
Great.
If
Okay.
everybody, if this is fine with everybody, then that's good. Yeah.
Let's talk about the main school, where we have a physical vulnerability of 50%. These values have been defined by authorities analyzing earlier events that occurred. So they saw that for a specific intensity, for example, high intensity, during an event, 50% of the buildings have been destroyed, and the other 50% were not. And they have analyzed several events that occurred in the last decades, and it was the mean value they became for this kind of object. That means concrete walls, typically for main schools, and they define this as this value. These are agreements between the people worked on the statistics of this analysis of earlier events. For sure, this is not correct for every main school because each main school is different, but you have to build a kind of mean value to be able to realize the calculations. The object value, for example, of $3,000. Well, in this case, I invented by myself just to make the example. But in each county is different. Maybe in Nepal, a mean value for a main school can be big, can be small. A mean value can be, I don't know, $100,000. In Switzerland, it will be higher as the incomes are higher there. So these are mean values, knowing that each main school has different construction value, for sure. But we have to standardize to be able not to calculate exactly individually for each building these values: physical vulnerability, object value, mortality. These are just main values. For the quantity amount of persons in the building, it would be possible also to work with mean values. But in this case, it has been defined as by your own, you can specifically mention the quantity of persons in the building as also a mean value during the whole year for this specific object, like the main school. The mortality has been built on the same way, depending on the physical vulnerability, considering that people can flee, that the destruction is not immediately, but along a certain time. So people have the possibility to go out of the building, but it is also possible that some parts of the building are hitting a person, and this person dies. So in that manner, the values has been defined. I remember in Switzerland, it was almost 30 years ago. There was a process of several years to define those values. And in also the willingness to pay, there was a process of several years to define this value. And in our project, it won't be possible to invest that much time to define these values. So it's recommendable to use values of countries. They have already done these agreements on the values. For sure, with each risk calculation, you will not be able to define the reality of the risks. It starts with the willingness to pay. You can, in other words, what's our value as persons? And $500,000 is not correct. Even $5 million is not correct. Even $1 is not correct. but it's important to work with standardized values to compare different projects and to be able to define, okay, I will invest my limit money in this kind of project or in this kind of mitigation measures, and relatively I can compare those projects or those areas where I'm planning to do mitigation measures. And it's relatively also important to compare risk before mitigation and with mitigation measure. So don't take this value as an absolute values, and they are absolutely correct. It isn't. But it's important to have, as I mentioned before, standardized values, that we are always working with the same values per object type, per hazard level, and then we reach this kind of values. And the list I will give you afterwards for the calculation, and also within Mi Resiliencia, this is a recommendation. You will be able to change those values once you have had a discussion with the authorities, the national authorities or regional authorities, or within your project. That will also be possible. So it's not absolutely fixed, those values. Within Mi Resiliencia, yes, they are fixed. And you have a person who is knows very well programming, he can change it. I will show you after the break an Excel tool where you can work with recommended values, but you can define your values by yourself. Is that okay for you, or should I intend to explain it in other words?
I see a lot of thumbs up and no questions.
Okay. Let's do a break for 10 minutes. I promised you to explain the aspect of the willingness to pay. Explaining you the example in Bolivia where we first implemented Mi Resiliencia, and it was a long process to define all the values. For the willingness to pay, Bolivia wanted to follow this methodology. They defined the willingness to pay regarding the amount of working years of a person. And they said that they start with 20 years, they start to work. I was a little bit surprised. It seems very late, but they defined as 20 years they start, and they will be retired it's depending on women or men, with 58 years. So they have 35 years of working duration. And when a people dies, economically for the country, it's a loss of years of purchase of 35 years. And they multiply this amount of years with the average salary income per person. And we added not just the formal income, but also the informal income, which is an important aspect in Bolivia and in many countries. And if you multiply 35 by 5,000, hopefully it's correct. The amount of $177,500. Let's calculate. It seems something doesn't work. Yeah, almost $175,000. I can't remember how we get 177,500, but it's more or less this value. So they defined it to go this way. In Switzerland, we followed another methodology. We the analysis was also in traffic situation and for other situation where loss of person have occurred. How much was the government disposed to invest. And for a traffic situation, there was about this $5 million before they observed. We had a traffic situation where, in a street where sometimes an accident happened, and after a couple of events, they decided to install a regulation of the traffic, which has its cost. And then they checked these earlier events to define how much the authority would able to invest, and they came as a result with this $5 million of dollars. So it's still until today the value that we work with to define that. In Chile, I know the government defined this as $2 million per person, and it depends on your country where you are. There are different methodologies to define the willingness to pay. I think it's important to mention this is it's not the value of a person, it's the willingness of authorities to invest to avoid death. But in easy words, it's the value of person, yes, but it's ethically it's not correct. The next group work is quite similar of what we have done before, but the slide looks a little bit different. We have the buildings number 2, 5, and 17. That means this orange building here, which is a hospital. We have number 5, which is a mill. And we have number 17 here on the upper side, which is a church. And the calculation equation is the same as we saw before. Obviously, it's the same for risk assets and for risk assets and risk for persons. And the list of values, you can see it here on the lower part of the screen. And here you have values like the object type, wooden house, brick house, standard school, church, water tank, and so on. I just made a screen of part of the long list. And you see a value per item, value per wooden house. In this case here, it's 20,000. The mean value amount of persons per floor is 4 person, and the hours per day in the building are 10 hours. And you see in the blue rows here, the physical vulnerability for low intensities, middle intensities, and high intensities. In our case here on the left side, almost all of the buildings are within high intensities. The building number 17 is in intensity 4. This is middle intensity regarding the 9-field diagram. And you have the mortality, low, middle, and high mortality. I highlighted the high row for high intensities, the mortality, as I mentioned, most of the buildings are in high intensity area, high level hazard areas with high intensities. The willingness to pay, we remain the value in $500,000. And I would like to ask you to, in the group work, to calculate for at least for number 2, building number 2, and if you have the time for 5 and 17 as well, the risk for the actual situation, as you see on the left photo, and then the risk value for the considered situation with the mitigation measure, where we channelize the flows on the lower part of the photo here. That means with the mitigation measures, the number 2 isn't anymore in high intensities, it's just in EN1. That means low intensity and low frequency. It remains return period of 100 years, but it changed from high intensity here in red to low intensity after the mitigation, with the mitigation measure. So please calculate at least for building number 2, risk before measures and risk with the measure. Builds the difference, and that will give you the value for the benefit of this mitigation measure. Afterwards, we have to compare it with the costs.
Georg, just a small question. I was just looking at the exercise 2, and on the exercise 2, and please correct me if I'm mistaken, I only see the map without the mitigation measure. I think we should have both maps on the exercise.
Huh? I didn't understand you, Tony.
In the group exercise that I have linked for the exercise 2, I only see one map, the one before the mitigation measures, but not the one after the mitigation measures.
And when you make a click? It doesn't appear?
No.
Okay, so I have to send you this slide. Maybe I can put this in the chat.
Because you know we don't look at it in a presentation mode. The click is not really working.
Yeah, just give me a second.
But I could take the slide you show here and put it on the exercise slide. Would that be okay?
No, look, Tony, maybe I can put it in the chat, the exercise number 2.
Yeah, better, huh?
Ah, you're right. Just 1 second. Ah, you're right. Yeah, that was a mistake from my side. So it will be better to work with what you see in the screen.
But so I take this slide and transfer it to the other.
Yeah,
to
please.
the group, huh?
Please.
Okay.
Okay, with that, Tony, we could split this in groups, huh? Of
Yes.
3 persons each. Tony, we got a question from Maria, I think, asking us how much time does it take to elaborate the hazard map? Not to calculate the risks, but to draw the hazard map. Once, Maria, you know the discharge value, the maximum discharge, and one, you know where the points in the channel are, or in the torrent are, where outflow can occur, you'll be fast. It's maybe 2 hours. Then it's done. You just have to follow the flow path, the possible flow path of the flood.
Okay.
And it depends also on the analysis level you are considering. If you just work in a qualitative manner, asking people of earlier events, so that's the fastest way, but the less precise way to realize the hazard mapping. If you work with the technical aspect, combining with the technical aspect, Joe, how much time did we had in our field day last year for a similar situation? A couple hours?
Yes, maybe 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah. And this area is a little bit bigger as what we have done before, half a day, maybe maximum 1 day. Okay, as time is running, I will go to share the screen one more time. I'm wondering, I think for many of us, the working steps are clear. Are there specific questions that we could answer at this stage? Tony, you mentioned we had some questions in the chat. Sanjit is writing, beyond that, the emotional attachment is there, which is very difficult to measure. Tony, can we help? Can you help me to?
That's the emotional part, you know, with in the opposite of the more economic that we calculate, you know, how productive is a human being. So that's how we calculate. And Sanjit says, yeah, but there's also this other part which is not calculated, and which is true, you know. But it, as far as I know, it doesn't come into account for this calculation, right?
Mm-hmm. No, this doesn't enter.
Yeah.
And Thomas is mentioning, what about persons with disabilities or mothers with no formal income? The value, the willingness to pay value is the same. It doesn't matter if it's an indigenous person, a woman or a man or a child. It remains the same value for each person, even they don't work. Okay, Jana is leaving. Ciao, Jana. I think we will go ahead, or are there other questions? Okay. Then I would like to ask you to open this website, thehazard-risk.com, because there you'll find a tool which makes you much more easy to calculate the risks. What we have done was really hard work. Now you'll get here a risk tool which makes it quite easy. I can show you how to reach the tool. When you go to hazard-risk.com, you'll be here. And then you have different tabs you can activate. We are talking about risk now. Those who would like to know how to elaborate the hazard map can follow this tab. We are now here on the risk. And then you get to this sub page where you can see the installation of Mi Resiliencia. That's the WebGIS tool we will learn next in the next module. And now you can download the Excel for cost-benefit analysis. You'll find on downloads the file, and then once you open it, you'll be here. You can download it while I'm explaining how to use it. I hope it's easy to understand. All the cells in yellow, in clear yellow color, are cells to entering values. First of all, you can define which kind of hazardous process are you dealing with. Are you working with dynamic floods, or are you working with landslides, shallow landslides, or are you working with debris flows? You have to define which kind of process are you working with. The next point is that you have to define your return periods that you are mentioning in your hazard map. Normally, we work with 3 scenarios: a 10-yearly event, a 30-yearly event, and a 100-yearly event, what we have seen in our hazard map before. You can see here also the willingness to pay. You can change it. It is now on 500,000, but you can change it as well as to 400,000, depending what you defined in your project as a willingness to pay. Here we didn't talk about the construction cost of the mitigation measure. For example, it costs $10,000. You can enter your own was heißt Währung, Tony?
Currency.
Your own currency doesn't have to be US dollar. You can choose your own currency. Maybe the maintenance cost is per year is $1,000. And the lifespan of the measure, it's not for the eternity. Each mitigation measure has its lifespan. In this case, maybe 30 years. After 30 years, you have to rebuild the mitigation measures. Okay. And then you have two windows. The first one here is for the initial situation. That means the situation without mitigation measures, what we saw in the slide before. And afterwards, you have a similar window for the situation, forecast situation, the situation with the mitigation measures. Let's go to the initial situation here. Per line, you have the objects. Each line is an object. Our first object is Adobe house. You can change the object type as a church, or it can be also a hospital, other object types, a mill. And then for the mill, in this case, in which hazard level it is localized. In my example, it is on level 9. That means high frequency and high intensity for the mill. Regarding this 9 field diagram here on the upper side, 9, that means frequent events and high intensities. In the next row, I have to define how many floors does the mill has. In my case, it's just one floor. If you are considering agricultural areas, shrimp farm, for example, you have to define how many hectares, the area that the shrimp farms covers. And if you are working with ways, streets, like community road, I have to define how many segments of 100 meters are within the hazard level 9. So let's go back to a brick house, for example. One floor or even maybe 2 floors. And in the gray column, it shows you the calculation of the risk without mitigation measure, the actual risk. And this you can repeat for the many of objects you have to consider. A church maybe is in hazard level 2. I have maybe a hospital hazard level 8, and so on. Depending on the hazard level you are entering, the color changes. Go to 5, it changes from red to blue regarding the hazard levels we have, red, blue, and yellow. What we haven't talked about are the indirect costs, the indirect risks that can occur for objects. As time is running, I prefer to explain you that in the next module. At the moment, it's important to know that for each object, you'll get the concerning risk value. Then, thinking of our mitigation measure that you apply, the brick house won't be in the hazard level 9, but maybe in hazard level 2 or hazard level 3, whatever. And then it will calculate automatically the risk for the situation with the planned mitigation measure. The sum of all these risk values per object will be the total risk shown here, 2008 to $118,794 per year. And the situation with the mitigation measures, the total sum is much lower. In this diagram here, you can see the monetized risks and the situation risk without measure, risk with measure, the benefit, which is the difference between this column and this column, and at the end, the cost of the mitigation measure. At the moment, I have a mitigation measure almost without any cost. Maybe my construction cost was too optimistic. I change it to $1 million. Okay. At the end, the tool is comparing the benefit, that means the risk difference, situation without and situation with mitigation measures, compared with the costs. Maybe you remember our example with the wolf we saw before, comparing benefit and costs. And in our example, you can see that the benefit is higher than the cost, 2.7. The factor benefit cost is 2.7. That means it is higher than 1. So it's recommendable to realize this mitigation measure. In other words, for justifying your investments for donors, for example, you can say, I gained almost 3 times what I invested. So this is an important value for the communication to donors. Donors want to know if they are a multiplicator of their investment. And if you can work with factors, values, it's much more easy to understand the benefit they gained for their investment. Now, this is the interface you can use, entering the object types, number of floors, and as we can see next time, the indirect costs. What I would like to show you is another tab here on the lower side, database. When you click on database, you have here all the object types. Here you can change the object types. You can say, well, in my area, there aren't any wooden houses. There aren't any adobe houses. In my area, I have no idea. I have Tony's weekend house, many of Tony's weekend houses, to say anything.
Zero value.
Zero value. And I have, maybe the value is $10,000. He has 4 floors, 4 persons per floor. The number of floors you have to enter in the other tab. Hours per day within the building, just 1 hour. So here in the Excel sheet, we have the possibilities to customize your risk tool to your project situation. When I go back to data entry, now it appears Tony's house here, Tony's weekend house. And it calculates, depending of the values you entered here on the other tabs, it calculates the risks customized on your own interests. This is the benefit to use the Excel tool. It's quite easy to customize the values. Theoretically, you could also modify all the vulnerability values, physical vulnerability, mortality. You could change it, but I prohibited the entrance. They are hidden here. Theoretically, you can You have all these values I showed you before, they are here. But as it is difficult to define it, and for many people it's difficult to understand those values, I decided to hide those values. But if you plan to change all these physical vulnerability values, you can do it. So the Excel is totally open for any kind of modifications, but be aware that the changes that you are doing can be very sensitive and can be change extremely the results. So be very, very careful with the changes of those blue values. And they recommend it to not touch them. But those values here, the yellow ones, you can change it however you want. And here I recommend you to modify it as your reality in your project are presented. The social capacity, I won't go, I will explain that next time, as it takes too much time, but these are all these capacity values, such as functional emergency committee, early warning system, existence of family contingency plans, access to emergency shelters, etc. These are all the criteria where we use a lot in our projects. I would like to spend enough time to explain you that next time. At the moment, I recommend you to do as a homework, to practice this Excel sheet, to take it as the exercise number 2, to take it as the basis to enter the data in the Excel value and to calculate those values and to calculate the benefit of your planned mitigation measures. Just play around a little bit with those values to become familiar with the tool. And as I mentioned before, this is one of the 2 tools I would like to present you. One is the Mi Resiliencia that we'll see next time. And here, this is the Excel tool you can use. Both are absolutely free of charge. There's no costs to use it. Where do I find, there's a question from Kiran, where do I find the training materials? Kiran, all these training materials, what I'm explaining, you can find it in the website here. For example, you go to hazard analysis, you have for flooding a minimal standard and advanced standard, for debris flow as well, and you have instructions for landslide hazard analysis and rockfall. When you go to flooding minimal standard, you have in English and in Spanish. You can activate the button.
Georg, he was a bit more clear now. The exercises. I would suggest that you use the 2 exercises that we have done a bit to work with the Excel sheet. Is that okay? Or do you have additional exercises foreseen, Georg?
No.
Okay. Just use. Now I hear my echo. Just use the exercises we have done. It's a bit just how to get the feeling of this this Excel sheet. And if you did not have time to complete all the whole exercise, you can also do that within the next weeks until we see each other again. Would that be okay?
Okay. Okay, sir.
Georg, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. We have more questions. Maria said, if I change the hours per day within building, does it change the mortality rate?
Yes.
Very directly so, huh?
Sure.
Yeah. And Thomas, maybe nature-based solutions have no lifespan? that's the question came in when we were discussing about the construction and the lifespan, mitigation work and the lifespan.
For sure, you have maintenance cost. This you can enter, and to do the calculation, you have to enter a lifespan. Even if you are doing, for example, reforestation, can be considered that the forest will survive 500 years, theoretically. Yeah, but you have to enter a lifespan. The methodology is oriented on lifespans.
Is it a big difference if I put 100 or 500?
Yeah, sure, yeah. Because
Okay.
you are calculating yearly costs.
The thing is with those nature-based solutions, it's difficult I think, to project so far ahead. But you have to, if you assume, if you do a cost-benefit analysis, you have to assume, okay, if I do reforestation, that will, last for the next 250 years.
Yeah, for example, mangrove forests will protect the coastline, so there's not much maintenance required.
Okay, but just let it low or without any maintenance cost. But mathematically, you have to enter the
formula,
lifespan.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other points?
Well, yeah, but that's a very open question from Ishvara. How can I minimize hazard risk like landslide? But yeah, you can give an answer, I think. Huh?
Yeah, the general answer is reforestation in many cases doesn't reduce the hazard level. It's a very common understanding that when I reforest an area, all is down and it's all okay. It's not the case. When you have profound landslide, the sliding horizon is deep, and the roots doesn't reach the sliding horizon, so the effect of the forest is almost zero. When you have very shallow cover, the forest can have a certain benefit regarding the frequency of events, but intensity will remain the same or even becoming worse. Hazard to reduce hazard risk or hazard levels. Well, yeah, the difference between hazard and risk, no? If you would like to reduce hazard levels, can be structural mitigation measures, reinforce the hillside wall of buildings, channelize landslides to an area where there aren't any objects, or in some case also reforestation. It's not that it doesn't have no effect, but when it's very shallow coverage, as I mentioned, it can be a certain effect as well. But then you go to the website and to the instruction of the landslide, and you will get some idea for the hazard analysis. Are there other points?
Okay.
It's time, Tony. What do you think? I finished. I think hopefully the homework is clear. We can discuss once you have your results for the next time. And I handle to you, Tony.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks a lot, Georg, for this interactive deep dive into quantitative risk assessment. with all those calculation exercises. I think that's it for today, huh? And I think, yeah, that was good. And I'm not gonna make it longer. What I can provide is probably again let's say the link to the website and maybe the exercise sheets. For homework for the next within the next 4 weeks. As a self-study. So, okay, that's all from my side. Looking forward to seeing you in 4 weeks. Again, same day, same time for the next webinar module. Thanks a lot. Bye for now and have a nice day.
Bye-bye to everybody.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you very much.